Hi, and welcome to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. My name is Jason Van Schie, and I'm one of the hosts of the show. The aim of the podcast is to rapidly increase the knowledge and application of psychological health and safety in workplaces worldwide. To help with this, we have regular guests from around the world who are leading the way in this important area. But before I introduce our guest and topic for today, allow me to introduce my co-host, Joelle Mitchell. How are you today, Joelle?
Jason, I'm pleased to let our listeners know that I'm back home again.
Yay!
Huzzah!
Amazing. And is it everything that you hoped it would be?
It's everything that I anticipated it would be.
So low expectations.
Yep. Yeah, I think there's probably just one issue that we're probably going to have to take through to the ombudsman. Yep. But that's okay. It's not a sort of an unlivable situation. So yeah, that's all right.
So I hear you bought a new bed.
I did, yeah. So what we're trying to do is reduce our furniture footprint whilst increasing our storage capacity. Mm-hmm. So I sold my lovely sort of solid wood Mary bed frame and got a just a base with drawers. And I had to wake up very early on a Saturday morning, which was not very nice, to let the delivery people get the mattress or get the base, into our house. And then when they got to our internal stairwell, the larger part of the base would not fit through our internal stairwell. So we had to send it back to the store, and now we have to use our store credit to find a different bed that will actually fit into our house. So, it was just a comedy of disaster, really. Like, waking up at 7 o'clock on Saturday morning for a bed to be delivered, spending half an hour watching these poor dudes trying to maneuver this chunk of bed around our stairwell. And yep. At least the shop were nice about it and said, that's fine, just send it back in the truck to the warehouse and we'll sort out something else. So yeah, I mean, they could have been jerks about it and said, oh, well, too bad, you should have measured. So at least that's a positive.
You'll have to get a bigger stairwell in your penthouse.
One day, Jason. Yeah.
Yeah. When you invest your shares. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. I'll just get an internal lift.
Yeah. Yeah. Why not?
Why not? Yeah. Why not? What could go wrong?
Well, we are talking about you.
I know. So. Let's not tempt fate.
Yeah. Well, look, we should probably, I guess has been waiting for a while, so should probably let her in.
Let's.
So she's another guest who is a registered psychologist with a master's degree in organizational psychology. Not that we just look for these types of guests exclusively, Joelle, but we do tend to attract a few.
We do. Yeah.
Yeah. She's got more than 10 years of experience working in corporate health with a particular interest in shaping and maintaining psychologically healthy and safe work environments. She is the head of psychological health, safety and wellbeing at Bupa Health. Welcome to the podcast, Chanel Nesci.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me today and for all of your work in this area. It's been really great to follow.
Yeah, Chanel, great to have you on. We had to wait a little while because you had to take some time out, didn't you, recently?
I did. I had to have my second baby, which was lovely, and it's been quite good. And yeah, very grateful for an easy second baby.
Yeah, no, I think we first chatted in your last week before going on maternity leave, and I must say that I think you only had 2 or 3 months off. It seemed to go very fast.
It did. It has gone fast. About 3 months off, and very well supported at work. So I get to work from home, and I have a part-time arrangement. So it feels like I've got a really good balance at the moment. So yeah, hopefully that can continue for a bit longer. And yeah, it's been a nice experience so far.
Yeah, great to hear it's going well, and great that we're able to get you onto the show so quickly after your maternity leave as well. So thanks for joining us.
No worries.
So Chanel, to get us kicked off, can you share with us some of your favourite podcasts?
If I'm being really honest, I think the only podcast I've listened to in the last probably 12 months would be some of yours. If I do get time to tune out and listen to something, I'm usually listening to music and not podcasts, just to get rid of some of the noise and just tune out for a bit. So that would has to be my most honest answer.
Yeah, I don't think you're missing out on anything.
No.
All of our guests listen to us exclusively.
That's
so
all you need.
They haven't mentioned any other podcasts.
No, nobody talks about any other podcast.
Yeah.
So can you tell us then about your professional career?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, I started off doing my honours in psychology, which I finished well over 10 years ago now. And then from there, I kind of fell into workers' comp and injury management and return to work, which was something I did not have much understanding of at all when I got my first role. But luckily, it was something that I really took to quite well. I really loved it. And I really liked the ability to work within workplaces, organisations of all different types, just learning as much as I could about how all different structures work. And because of that, I soon after decided to do my org psych and human factors masters, and from there continued in the rehab space for about 5 or 6 more years, and then got my role at Bupa in 2016. Starting off in the workers' comp injury management area, and then with some really great support from quite visionary leaders, developed a mental health and wellbeing advisory team, and sort of just grown from there. As you know, the industry's grown, the landscape's changed, and my role now is to lead a team of there's 5 of us, including me, and we look after the mental health and wellbeing of our Bupa employees across Asia Pacific, which is well over 20,000 people now. So that's a bit of the journey, and yeah.
Fantastic. It's nice to hear that you've had the opportunity to do some job crafting there and sort of build into the organisation in response to the needs that you've seen there. So that's great that they've supported you in being able to do that.
Definitely, and that's exactly a really good way to put it. Job crafting, we with the support of our senior leaders, just basically paved the way for this area, and we're able to grow it into our own. And yeah, it's something that I'm incredibly grateful for. So very good call out.
Now, one of the reasons we reached out to you initially, Chanel, was because of your title, Head of Psychological Health and Safety. There's not a lot of people yet. I feel it's going to be a bigger role or more common role in organizations moving forward. But you're kind of one of a few, I guess, professionals working internally in a company who have that title. And like I said, there's few people who actually have that title, let alone people who have a team of people working underneath them in a psych health and safety function. So tell us about your role. You know, what does an internal head of psychological health and safety do?
Yeah, so despite the title, it's actually still quite a hands-on role. I work quite closely with my team, alongside my team. And now that we do have the team, it is becoming a lot more strategic and giving me a bit more time to plan our direction and that side of things. But on a day-to-day basis, you'll find me and my team working alongside our leaders, our operational managers, our HR professionals within the business whenever there is an identified risk to the psychological health of our people. That might be an individual, it might be a team, it might be because of work design, it might be because of a traumatic incident or event, it could be work-related, it could be non-work-related. So we really do get involved to protect the mental health of our people, and that can look like a variety of different things, whether that's individual case management support or more of an advisory, let's develop an initiative around this particular concern. In addition to that, we develop and run a lot of training sessions to increase our mental health knowledge across the organisation. That might be on workplace mental health, supporting your colleagues with mental health concerns, family and domestic violence, suicide prevention and awareness, mental health first aid. We also run that program within Bupa. We particularly are actually looking at upskilling ourselves as trainers in mental health first aid, so we can internalise the training there, and a variety of different other topics: fatigue management, burnout prevention and awareness. Yeah, so I could go on, but we really do like to have a training and education aspect to our team, and getting out and getting this information to everyone face to face, virtual at the moment. And then creating resources to go with those trainings to better embed that knowledge. That might be in the form of guidance, materials, fact sheets, articles on our intranet, toolbox talks, train the trainer type arrangements with leaders. So really getting the message out, communicating it, working with our internal comms teams as much as we possibly can to really get that message out there. And in addition to that, from a risk management perspective, we work really closely with our safety operations teams to develop their Psych risk registers, which is it's an ongoing process, identifying gaps in controls, helping them fill those gaps. So a lot of those control and those interventions might sit with my team to create something, and also assist in things like psych assessments, consultations with our business, and really making sure that we do everything we can to support the organisation to better manage our risks. And then in addition to that, our team also is in the process of reforming our wellbeing program and making it a more equitable and integrated program for our people as well, to really promote and prevent this in this space as well.
Well, with the amount of activity that you're doing, no wonder you need a team of people underneath you to fulfill all of those things. It's quite a lot. I'm interested, do the rest of the business understand what is meant by your title around psychological health and safety?
Yeah, it's a really good question. We started off as a mental health and wellbeing advisory team. So for a number of years, we had we undertook a lot of the things that I just mentioned, but with less of a framework, with less of a safety focus on that. So that's where a lot of that case management, more like specialist HR support when it came to people experiencing mental health concerns, that's the space that we would really occupy. As we have progressed, and as we've seen things like the Safe Work Guidance material that was released in 2018, and now with the New South Wales Code of Practice and the ISO, there is a lot more understanding of psych health and safety and how that fits within a safety team and a safety agenda. And our team sits in the safety function alongside our return to work team and alongside our risk and governance and central safety reporting team, which is within the wider people team and HR team. So I'm definitely seeing a lot more understanding of when we're talking about safety legislation, that doesn't just apply to physical safety. The psych health and safety component is definitely getting a lot more understanding, psychosocial risks, and where workplaces need to be aware of what they are and how they present is definitely getting a lot more understanding and traction.
Yeah, no, that's good to hear. I've seen a few, and I think Alicia has spoken about her own experience before in our team, working as an internal person and coming from a mental health manager, a mental health and wellbeing manager, and making that title was really strategic around that where the focus needed to be, and getting the company alongside to understand what the role is broader than fruit bowls and yoga and lunch and learns and that sort of thing. So yeah, nice.
So Chanel, can you tell us a bit about your team? So do they have do you sort of have different specific functions assigned to different roles, or do they all just kind of work out of a pool of activities?
So the team is basically, we are split into psychological health and safety partners and our wellbeing specialists. We have one wellbeing specialist, and one of our psych health and safety partners also leads the wellbeing program and area for our organisation. So all of them we haven't really split people up to different areas of the organisation. I really wanted everyone in the team to have a really good understanding of the whole organisation. It is a really widely dispersed business. We've got a number of different business units. We've got a number of different geographic areas, and I didn't want to silo people into different areas, because I do think there is a value in collaborating and learning from each area. So that's how we've structured ourselves. Half the team have a really, really strong injury management and workplace background. So working in the comp and non-comp spaces within a number of different industries. So they've brought those skills and understanding the legal requirement of making sure that we're looking after our people, and also the operational requirements of how do we do this in a way that works for everyone. And the other half of the team have really strong wellbeing backgrounds and institutional wellbeing type experience.
Yeah. So in terms of interacting with the rest of the business, you're saying you sort of keep it central within your team, and then rather than having them sort of allocated to different parts of the business. So how does that work? Does one of your other business units come and request some help, and then you decide sort of who from your team is going to be best placed to provide that?
Yeah, so because we sit within our people function, we've got a lot of interaction with our HR professionals, and they're all allocated to different areas of the organisation. So whenever something is raised that may require our support, or it is quite a clear psychosocial risk that needs psychosocial risk management support, they'll often engage us from there. We also get access to mental stress incidents. So when they come through, we'll allocate those to whoever's the person with the most capacity or the most experience in that particular area. We also partner with we've got a central safety team, but also we've got operational safety teams who are allocated to each different business area. We partner really closely with them, and they'll get the experience of all of us depending on who's best for that particular project. So we definitely have a huge diversity in work that we all do, and it's divided based on who's got the capacity to commit to this at the moment, who's done this before and can really bring their knowledge to this particular piece of work, and or who wants experience in this piece of work and wants to take it on. So it's definitely a collaborative approach amongst our smaller team to work out who's the best fit for different types of things.
We talk a lot about the need for collaboration between the sort of health and safety functions and the HR functions. Is that something that your team members will facilitate as well?
Yeah, we are a pretty collaborative group in terms of us, as well as the relationships we've made over a number of years that I myself have been at Bupa, and one of the other team members. The other team members just started in the last 6 months, and they have already created a really good relationship to enable that collaboration. I think that can be one of the most difficult things in our space sometimes. But yeah, we facilitate collaboration between our different HR areas, and if we see that this needs an ER approach, or this needs a risk kind of lens, or a WHS operational person's contribution to this, we'll link people in. But it does happen quite innately. I think sometimes, depending on the situation or the concern that we're trying to manage, a lot of us are quite used to saying, hey, we need you in this one. Can you come along to this so we can support it with a really holistic view?
Yeah, interesting. I quite like that you do have that almost sort of, you're acting as the grease between the cogs, the different cogs in the different functions sometimes. So that's good to hear that that's going on.
Yeah. I'm interested to know, because you've spoken about some of the activities that you do and where you get involved, and a lot of it is kind of traditional, either injury management or kind of wellbeing type activities, training, that sort of thing. We obviously on our podcast, as you know, talk a lot about more risk management kind of approaches to dealing with work-related stress at the source. How have you gone so far in implementing in those practices? I'm interested to know about the maturity of your approach and how far you're along the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely, as I mentioned, coming from a mental health and wellbeing advisory type team to realizing the gap in the traditional safety way of managing risk, and the fact that psychosocial risks really weren't considered, even though they are obviously in the legislation, they are meant to be considered. It's just less obvious when it comes to a psych type mentality rather than a physical risk management type space. So we knew we had a lot of really great things. We knew we were doing things that would look after our people, that would prevent harm, but nothing was really within a safety framework or a system. So we needed to say, okay, well, how can we create what we've got and further develop what we've got to better integrate into our safety management system? So we put together a framework in which we wanted to work within, which is based on the safe work model as well as the WHSQ model: promote, prevent, intervene early, support recovery. And within that framework, we also added, because of the fact that we've got a really large workforce, and this is something that we do spend a bit of time on, we also added managing crises to our framework. So that's essentially what we wanted to work within. And we saw that, managing a crisis really, really effectively, and having a number of individuals, of which, unfortunately people do experience mental health crises, and managing those appropriately and effectively also feeds into your prevention and your early intervention and your supporting recovery approach as well. So we took those 5 components. We spent a lot of time initially, so throughout 2018, 2019, getting people on board, really educating our senior leaders, really making sure that people understood what is psych health and safety, what is psychosocial risk, where are these risks within our workplace, where are they within workplaces in general, who are the stakeholders when it comes to managing this stuff, and really just planting those seeds so that when we talk about psych health and safety, people know what we're talking about. It's not psychological safety, it's psychological health and safety. It's very much an integrated approach within how we manage safety in general within our organisation. So that's the journey we started, really, really very much an engaging kind of approach. Then from there, we changed our WHS, our yearly mandatory learning module, to include a section specifically dedicated to educating all of our people on psychological health and safety, and that's going to be launched this month, which is really good. So that's the first time we've gone out to all of our people with a mandatory online learning module, that because it is still everyone's responsibility, and it's just a different way of thinking about safety. So that was something that we were really pleased to be able to do. From there, we worked with our business units to establish risk registers. So our psychosocial risk registers, we've got a number of different business units. Some of their risks are really quite similar. Some of them are a little bit different. So we needed to work individually with our WHS specialists, with our risk teams within those areas, and with our operational teams to understand what are your risks, what controls do we have in place. We might not have everything all in a row, really effective controls. That's okay. How can we better understand what our risks are, and therefore where are our gaps, and how can our team help you fill those? We informed those risk registers based on some kind of consultation with our operational teams, but also because of the fact that, because we've been in this organisation a number of years and we've done so much in that mental health and wellbeing advisory training space, we spend a lot of time with our frontline. We spend a lot of time at our care homes, spend a lot of time in our contact centres, a lot of time in our dental practices, talking to our people for years and years and years. We've got really great relationships with a lot of them. So we informed our risk registers based on that consultation, as well as based on with the consultations with the operational leaders. Moving forward, I think that I'd really like to have more formal consultation at a wider level. I'd really like to see volume consultation through a psychosocial risk assessment, and also through focus groups. So a bit more formal type consultation type avenues. But that's where we're at the moment. We're also looking to implement a psychological health and safety standard within our safety system, because we want to, and we thought, do we integrate it into what we already have? But I think it's one of those things that it's important enough to call out. Business is really on board with that. So we are going to have a separate standard based on Bupa's position on psychological health and safety. And through that, we've also been represented now, my team particularly has been represented on our WHS committees, risk committees, boards. It really is front and center for a lot of our executives, and also a lot of our communities of practice and things like that. They're talking about it everywhere. So that's how we've sort of moved from a informal way of addressing mental health and wellbeing to a bit more of a systemic approach.
Yeah, that's amazing, like the journey. And I think for our listeners to hear, this isn't something that you just introduce overnight. I mean, this has been strategically doing this over a number of years to get to the point that you are at now. Interesting how, like you said, you really work closely with frontline, and you have a lot of exposure to frontline, so you're aware of their issues, and so that was able to help you to inform your risk registers. Interesting to hear how you plan on monitoring hazards. I know you said that you'd like to bring in some more formality around risk assessment. Is that what you're looking at as like a way of monitoring hazards over time and identifying if your controls are being effective?
Absolutely. So I think we've got quite a bit of work to do in that space in terms of, we're in the process of refining a survey that's already been created for our organisation to say, what are our main risks? What are our main areas that we need to focus on? And then also, what is our cadence after that to work on, let's look at, these 5 top priorities for this business area and these 3 for that business area. Let's make sure we put into our action plans the ability to, control them in whatever way we can, consult with our people along the way to make sure that if we are developing controls, that are they going to work, and make sure that they're involved in that process. But then from there, retesting essentially to see if that risk profile has changed. I'll be able to tell you more about that once we get the first stage done, but we are definitely looking at putting that into our standard as to how often are we sort of checking and getting those pulse checks to make sure that whatever we are doing is working. It is traditionally a hard area to measure, even through incident data and things like that. We've actually seen an increase in our incidents because we have encouraged more reporting in this space. People don't realise that something that has the potential to cause harm psychologically, or may have caused harm psychologically for someone, but may not necessarily for someone else, still needs to be recorded so we can know that it's there and know to do something about it. So our incident management is also something that we're working on, but I do think we would really like to see some sort of cause and effect type data collection over time, and that might be something we do every 12 months, every 18 months, something like that. I'd really love to be able to really action something before we retest it, which is sometimes the case with surveys. And, people get a bit over them because they don't see the action in between them. So I don't want to fall into that space, but I do want to be able to be on top of it enough to get those pulses and work out what's working and what might need further refinement.
Yeah, I think that's an important point that you've made there. You need to allow time for an intervention to actually have done its job before worrying about remeasuring. We hear all the time about survey fatigue, and I think the issue is that people often don't see any results or actions based on the surveys that they participate in. So when the next one comes around, they're less likely to want to engage in it. So, even with things like our Wellbeing check-in tool, which takes 30 seconds as a way of kind of like doing hazard identification, we still don't recommend that companies should do it more than once a month, because we've had people go, we could do this daily or we could do it weekly. And we're like, yeah, if you want to piss off your employees, go ahead. But allow yourself some time to actually do something on the back of a survey. I think that's actually really good advice to listeners who are looking at getting into risk assessment.
Absolutely. So, Chanel, I guess in relation to the sort of this shift into proactive risk management, hazard identification, what sort of response have you received from the rest of the business?
Our team does feel incredibly valued by our organisation. I think that is because, we did spend a lot of time doing those things that weren't necessarily that risk management type space. And that's the stuff that people really appreciate. You supported me manage this situation, which is still supporting those people, but it's a bit more tangible for the user. And I think that because we did spend a lot of time building those relationships and making quite a lot of impact with the sessions that we've run and with the resources that we've developed, I think that allowed us to transition to a bit more of a safety, traditional risk management approach, and getting the buy-in from the organisation, as well as the safety teams and the risk teams and the operational teams that have such a big part to play as well. I think that made it a little bit easier. We definitely feel very valued by our senior leaders and very well accepted by executive leaders who really want to know, what are we doing in this space? How are we making our workplaces safer for our people? Have we done enough? Are we doing enough? They're asking all the right questions. And at the same time, we feel really valued by the frontline employees that we interact with and that we work with. And they know that we're doing our best to help them by asking them the questions and getting them involved in the process as well. So it's a really rewarding role. And I've had a lot of really good feedback about the team and what we were and how we've transformed into what we are and what we will continue to kind of become and build. But we haven't dropped the Psych mental health advisory and those services either. We are doing a bit of both, just to still have that, impact and what people see as really valued services for them, even though it may not necessarily be your traditional safety risk management type stuff.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So it's sort of because you've in performing a different function, you've built credibility and trust and psychological capital. So then when you're making these sort of recommendations that this is the direction that the business needs to move into, because you've already created those relationships and built that credibility, there's more of that willingness to accept your recommendations and act on them than might otherwise be the case.
Absolutely. I think we would have had a lot more resistance and a lot more barriers if we hadn't had a lot of those relationships, right up to our CEO, who's so supportive of this space. If we hadn't had a lot of those relationships established initially, yeah.
Mm.
So surely you would have come across some obstacles though, or, some sections of the business that haven't been so accommodating.
I think the barrier in our space and the difficulty when we are managing psychosocial risk is that it's not just a safety team concern. It's not that the solution doesn't lie with us a lot of the time. There are so many other moving parts. I might think this is a really great solution to this problem. This control would be great, but then there are not only safety implications, there are industrial implications, there are operational implications, and the barriers and I guess the obstacles come with the fact that my area is my priority and that's what's most important to me. But there are so many other really important areas and other priorities that are so important to those areas that it comes back to, well, what is the most reasonably practicable solution to this problem? And in order to get that, you need so much collaboration. You need everyone around the table. We need to have a really deep understanding of their priorities and what they need to achieve from an operational or industrial perspective, and they need to have a really strong understanding of what we need to achieve from a psychological risk management perspective and our regulatory obligations. So I think that is probably the biggest barrier, is that there's a number of very busy people with a lot on and a lot of priorities that need to be juggled to eventually come to the best solution. I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we've got that 100% yet. I think everyone has the best intentions, but I would probably say that is still, bringing people on that journey, getting to where we need to be together, is still something that not only us, but I think a lot of people are still working through at the moment.
Yeah, you're right. There is so much collaboration required and so much stakeholder engagement that you need to do to do this effectively. And it would be great if you could just, simply add FTE to deal with the work overload issue. But obviously that's not always the most practicable thing to do. I think some of the resistance is that, psychological hazards are often unseen. And the level of risk, so the likelihood that someone is actually going to be harmed and require time off work is abstract and, not necessarily tangible. So, I'm really hoping that, in the future we do have, really good understanding of risk using kind of predictive data to do that. But data capture then is really important, and then coming up with really good algorithms based on great longitudinal data is going to be very important. So I see there's a big gap, and I think hopefully that's one of the tools that will help make these decisions a bit easier. Going, well, there is a real risk here. We've measured it. If we don't do something, this is what the outcome is likely to be. So we need to do something, right? And then hopefully we get a little bit more leeway from people who are pulling the strings in other areas. But it's about how do we get it up the priority chain, and ROI I don't think is an effective way to bring it up. It's about really understanding the people risk.
Absolutely. And I think the other difficulty is that, you know, people have different levels of ability to cope with certain things. And we're bringing people in with their own experiences, predispositions. And from a leader's perspective, they might see some of their team going really well in a quite high pressure and stressful environment, and therefore a benchmarking against those people and the people who may be struggling with the workload because it is unreasonable are seen as more that's a performance issue or resilience issue. And that's where I think we come unstuck, because we need to really look at it as a whole and know that everyone is different. Everyone's coming in with different levels of abilities and capabilities and mental health, but we need to look after them all. And it needs to be an approach that is reasonable for as many people as we can. And then if people are struggling, how do we support them in a way that helps to bridge those gaps? And I think that's another difficulty is that if you've got a population that's doing really well and a population that's not, sometimes that population is seen as, oh, well, maybe they're just not good enough at this role, rather than, well, what's actually wrong with the work design here, so that everyone has the opportunity to succeed.
Yeah, and I think that's where the shared responsibility can really help out, right? We design work to be safe and healthy for the majority of employees. And then if people want to job craft at an individual level and go, well, I'd like to take on, you know, some extra responsibilities. I crave a higher workload, you know, allow them to do it. But then when it comes down to performance management, we don't, you know, then benchmark against those people who are doing above and beyond. They're doing more than what's actually requested of them. So that's another issue to be considered as well. So
yeah, I'm thinking about an analogy that one of our clients made around, you know, different people have different capacity to lift, you know, things of varying weights. I would assume that Jason could probably lift something a bit heavier than I could.
But you do yoga though, I don't. So
well, that's true.
You have much better core strength than me.
That is true. Yeah. I didn't consider that.
Yeah.
But we don't benchmark on what the dude who, you know, spends 10 hours at the gym each week can lift and then expect everybody else to be able to do that. You know, we base our limits of what we allow one individual person to lift in the workplace based on, you know, what's reasonable for the majority of the population, not what the strongest of the population can manage. So yeah, I think we probably need to adopt a similar approach from a mental health perspective. You know, what's a normal amount of job demands that a normal person would be able to manage, and you know, recognize that factors outside of work can sometimes impact on that, in the same way that if we have muscle strain, you know, we maybe can't perform to the normal level. If we've got a lot of stuff happening outside of work, then that's going to impact the amount of workload that we can take on as well.
Absolutely. Definitely.
Yeah, no, it's a great analogy.
So can you offer us some suggestions? So if we've got listeners who are currently in the process of scoping out this kind of work, do you have any suggestions or tips for them?
Yeah, I think based on our journey and based on some of the key points that you pointed out from what I've been saying today, I do definitely think that bringing people on that journey and making it accessible to everyone is really, really important. So, you know, safety, I feel like, is just seen as really dry and technical. And if you don't have safety experience and you don't have a background in safety, you know, you sort of go, oh, I'm not going to understand that. I can't play a role in that. I don't get it. When that's actually really not the case. I think that if we can make this content, and, you know, even the term psychological health and safety, it sounds technical. It kind of tunes people out sometimes. I think that if we can make what we do simple and you know, just really plain English and just things that people can relate to, what's in it for them, I think that can really help drive an agenda and get people on board a lot easier than trying to make it too technical. I really think that safety engagement piece is really important, and if not just as important as, you know, your technical safety components, because that's what essentially makes your system work, and having people really understanding what their role is, what are we talking about, and making it as simple and engaging and easy to understand as possible is really, really important. I think that's really helped us along the way as well.
No, that's great. I'm interested, Chanel, because you've been working in this space for, I guess, 10 years, right? Post degree. You've seen things move, and obviously you're responsible for moving some of the conversations and the lens that people are looking at workplace mental health at Bupa. But what are your hopes for the future of workplace mental health broadly?
I would really, really like for workplaces and organisations to understand that they do have a social and moral responsibility to their people and to our communities. I think that, we shouldn't just be aiming to prevent psychological harm. I think when you're talking about workplaces and unis and schools and all these institutions where people are spending so much of their time, we have such a unique opportunity and a significant opportunity to be able to, promote health and well-being, create safe places for people to reach out for support, educate people on why help seeking is so important, prevent mental illness, address mental illness if it's there, prevent suicide. I think that there's so much more that we can be doing, and organizations with big footprints and even small organizations that I think sometimes slip through the cracks when it comes to managing psychosocial risk and preventing harm to their people. And I think we should just be really aiming to look after our people in a way that is not only for our people, it's actually for our society. And that's what I'd really like to see in hopefully the not too distant future.
Yeah, and I'm hoping, and we've had podcasts on this previously, the sustainability angle and shareholders holding employers to a higher account in terms of how they look after their people. And it shouldn't just be all about how do we get more engagement and productivity and ROI out of doing mental health, but it should be thinking about, well, morally, we should be looking after the people who are coming in and helping our company be successful. So I really hope to see more companies strive to have more social impact and be sustainable through, having sustainable work practices. Yeah, I'm with you.
Make it happen.
So we do have lots of listeners who are not working in this field yet, but are potentially interested in moving into this field. Do you have any words of advice for them?
I think just letting everyone know that it is a journey. It is a journey. It's a long journey, and by no means do I want to sound like we are at utopia. We aren't. We know that we have much more to achieve, and I'm so realistic in the fact that it will take time to achieve it. I think what's really great now is that we are getting much more support through things like the Code of Practice and the ISO and organisations like your own. I think it is becoming much more prescriptive than it ever has before, which helps us to know exactly what we're doing on the journey, when before it may have been a little bit more of a, I think this is the right way to go, but is it? So I would probably just say that safety teams, mental health teams, wellbeing teams, psych health and safety teams, we can't do it in isolation. So get the people that you need on board to really drive this agenda, help use the resources that we've got, use the legislation that we've got, and the regulatory expectations to define what exactly is needed. And we're not talking about wellbeing programs anymore. We're not talking about, you mentioned before, your fruit boxes and your mindfulness apps, and it's not a nice to have. Psychological health and safety is a must have. We must all work to have this, and we must be able to demonstrate that we're going on the journey. So I think that by engaging your stakeholders and all the people that need to be around that table, from your executive leaders to your frontline, I think that that's probably my parting advice would be, just get them all on board in a way that can help you, because you can't do it by yourself. You can't do it alone.
So it's all about that consultation and collaboration.
Absolutely.
Yeah, terrific. Chanel, we've been so lucky to have you on today, especially so recently after having Dr. Laura Curry from Commonwealth Bank on as well. We really do want to feature more people like yourself who are having that impact in an internal role and really driving the adoption of psychological health and safety in large workplaces in Australia and beyond. So thank you so much for making some time available in the part-time capacity that you're in at Bupa at the moment. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you again for having me, and thank you for trying to raise the awareness in this space. I haven't seen anything like this before, so it's been really good for even my knowledge and connecting with the people in this industry. It's been really, really great.
Yeah, no, thanks, Chanel. And look, if you are someone working in an internal psych health and safety role in an organisation around the world and you would like to come on the podcast, please do reach out, because we do want to create this community and keep connecting Chanel with great people who are doing great work, because that's how we learn. We learn from each other. So please do reach out. But look, don't forget, listeners, that brings us to the end of the episode, and we do record these over Zoom. So we will publish this on YouTube. So if you'd like to watch it rather than listen to it, you feel free to find it on the Flourish DX YouTube page. You can also head over to the Flourish DX LinkedIn page if you'd like to see some small snippets of gold from this episode and others. And while you're over on LinkedIn, feel free to connect with Joelle and myself to connect and to continue the conversation. And I'm sure Chanel would like to connect with like-minded professionals in the space as well over LinkedIn.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks again, listeners, and we will catch you next episode.